So what we've got here is just some heavily sped up video. I think it's 64 times of me making the main connections for the wiring of the quad. So you don't want to watch this real time because it was hours worth of work. Here I am making the motor connections happen to the ESC so the ESC can send power out to the motors. Um, I do have a little bit of this video, I think, out of sequence, but for the most part, this is the order. So now I'm starting to figure out routing for things like the wires coming from the GPS and wires going to the buzzer, etc. I'm off camera, I think, heat shrinking the buzzer to the underbelly of the board here in a second. Yeah, and then I come back, and then here in another couple of seconds of fast forward video, we'll start actually making the connections. So I'm getting the wires out, creating a pin for the set of pins for the GPS to plug those wires in so that we can figure out the routing, and then we will start soldering up these components here in a sec. So yeah, so of the solder connections that we just talked about earlier, oh, and I do assemble the quad back together real quick just to make sure that everything's going to fit and there's room for all the wires. So now we're making the connections for the video transmitter and the receiver on that daughter board, that sled that carries them, getting those wires all connected so we can figure out that routing and then start making those connections to the flight controller. So here we are twisting things up, pre-tuning wires, and we're going to start making our first connections to flight controllers right here. So, I showed you earlier what all those connections are. This is kind of what it takes. It's really, really small little pads. You have to be really precise. Make sure that you don't have any what we call solder bridges or connections that accidentally connect two pads because of
All the
blob of solder.
connections for the GPS on this
Here, I'll let
edge,
myself talk.
and the buzzer on this edge. Got all the wires tucked up underneath there. Got the connections. You saw all of those. There's our wires for our camera coming off. And there's the pigtail on the camera underneath there. That's how that's going to connect. I was able to get the crossfire antenna tucked up under there real nice and clean. And then we will have the VTX antenna that snaps onto that IFL just like that. Same kind of connector.
I should have said
And
UFL.
that'll come down from up here and just thread over to there.
So, I mean, that's most of the connections. I don't have video of me putting the little LEDs on the arms, but we'll go ahead and show you a finished image of the quad here at the end. And I hope that gives you a sense of what goes into building a micro long range or most any other quad that's going to have this particular group of components. And it's not free. It takes a fair amount of time, and these components do cost money, but really time, a lot of time at the workbench soldering all this up and getting these connections solid. Next step is we set up the firmware and get ready to actually test fly this thing. So look for that in the very near future. Thanks.